All right, so managing small ministries. We could be here for months talking about that subject. So I wanted to just cover a couple of key things that I developed and learnt about, and things that just help simplify the process of managing a small ministry. And the example I'm going to give is the last small ministry that I managed, which was Pulse 94.1, the Christian radio station that I was in charge of for 8 years, almost to the date. Small ministries, Christian radio stations, things like OM, things like a Christian bookshop, certainly a church. They all are ministries, right? We're all here for the Christian purpose. But as my mentor said to me when we first met up for our first session, who was an ex-lawyer, he said, he goes, I have to apologise, I'm going to use the term business during our conversation, but I do understand that it's a ministry. And I said, no, that's fine. I understand that there's a business side to the ministry. God calls us to be good stewards, and that means keeping an eye on our cash flow. It means being good stewards of our time for a Christian radio station. That means good stewards of your airtime as well, and many other aspects. So I just wanted to prelude what I'm going to say with, I understand that we're here for the kingdom of God. I understand that probably for a lot of us, we certainly feel or acknowledge that we're called to the ministry that we're involved in. And the prayer and the ministry and the good works that we do is all very important. But if we neglect the business side of it, then it's just all going to fall apart. It's not going to go anywhere. And there might be the rare case, like a friend of mine runs an organisation called the Fatherhood Foundation, and he is a great Christian man, and it's all about encouraging fathers with Christian values, but he's off his rocker a lot of the time. He encourages fathers in 1 second, but then he's going over and being political, doing political advocacy for same-sex marriage, or he's he's always off on a tangent, and he's got no business skills, and for some reason he still gets funded. People still donate to him because they've known him for years and years and years, and it's almost like God uses him in spite of himself. Okay? Now, I feel like that with me and ministries that I've run as well. I'm like, well, gee, I made a mistake here and here, or I wish I didn't do that, or I wish I knew what I knew now 4 years ago. And I do have to agree, sometimes God uses us in spite of ourselves. But if I look at this guy from the Fatherhood Foundation, that ministry's never going to grow. And I always sort of hear what he's saying and hear his frustrations about what he wants to do with it. And I go, yep, there's just one thing stopping your vision from happening, and that's you. If he removes himself from the organisation and appoints, another group of people, that ministry will grow with the right leadership. But he's a good friend of mine, and so I say this stuff to his face as well. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things. We've got limited time, and I do tend to segue, so I'm just going to try to get into it. A term called strategic congruence, or congruence, depending on how you pronounce it. But strategic congruence is a term that I learnt when I was studying my MBA, my Masters in Business. And it's probably the favourite part of what I learnt out of all the 12 subjects and a couple of years of study. What it means is that the vision that the board or the CEO or the pastor or the board of trustees sets at the top, the vision and the mission statement are the lens that everything else is seen through. So if the vision is spreading the love of God through radio, okay, that's the vision or vision mission, let's say. I'm not going to have time to get into that, but that's the lens that everything is seen through, kind of like a filter that everything that everyone, excuse my voice, in the organisation does is seen through that filter, and not only seen through it, but everything is aligned to it. So we have the vision at the top, and then we have the person who is doing the receipts, okay, an admin role, doing the receipts, maybe as a volunteer, once or twice a week. They come in and they do the receipts for the donations. But the way that that person acts and the way, even the procedure that they do the receipt process has to be in alignment with the vision at the top. So that's what strategic congruence is. It means if the vision is spreading the love of God through radio, then when the person doing the admin role, say at the bottom of the pack, when they are answering phone calls, or when they are writing a note, or when they are entering a note about the donor into the database, that they have to do that with the vision in mind. They have to do it keeping in mind that the vision of the organisation is spreading the love of God. And when a person is speaking in church about it, they have to speak with that vision in mind. And it can get a lot more complicated depending on what the vision and the mission statement plus the values are, of course. But what I want to look at is some key success factors, or critical pillars, if you like, which uphold an organisation. That looks good. Each organisation, no matter what it is, no matter if it's Apple Computers or Westpac Bank or HSBC Bank, thank you, they all have pillars which uphold the organisation. Now, I ended up dividing my pillars or my key success factors into 4 bigger groups that had some smaller sections underneath them. And they were, from the centre, merchandise or your product. So whether that is a radio broadcast, a TV program, a book, or a service, some sort of service that you're doing. I call it merchandise because it starts with M's. Yeah, there's 4 M's. So you've got your merchandise in the middle. That's, in business terms, again, and I know we're talking about Christian ministry, but in business terms, we have to start with what our merchandise is. And in looking after that, and this is a radio example, the key areas under merchandise were programming, so what we choose to broadcast, music, preaching shows, 60-second positive moments, whatever it might be, a choice of advertisers. They all had to come under the vision, the strategic congruence. And the other part of our merchandise, which was an essential pillar, was building and technology. So now technology is changing, and maybe this will change, but at the moment we need a studio and we need a antenna and we need a tower and we need something like an STL transmitter and receiver to link the two. Okay? You don't often have the tower at the studio end, but you know, some people are lucky to have that. So that is, well, that's three pillars, let's say, but that's the first pillar that any organisation must have in order to exist. And so maybe your merchandise is sermons. If you're in a church, your merchandise might be sermons, and that just might be one of your products, or something that we're going to refer to right now as merchandise. The second part of it is marketing. We need to let people know what's going on. It doesn't matter. You might be a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, undiscovered, that's written, you know, the sequel to War and Peace, and it's awesome. It's got fairies in it, because my daughter wants to read it. And it might be the greatest book ever written. But if nobody ever hears about it, it's useless. It's useless beauty. That product that we have, you have to let people know about it, or it has to be discovered somehow. Now, you don't want your product to be like the Dead Sea Scrolls that weren't discovered for almost 2,000 years, you know. I mean, that's great, you know, but nobody's going, but you know, I don't want to create a product for my environment that's not going to be picked up for a long, long time. Now, we know that happens. It happens with art. You know, Vincent van Gogh, I don't think he ever sold a painting in his life, if I remember rightly. Yeah, one, somebody says, yeah. There's different stories, yeah. I don't, who knows? But he didn't sell much, and he didn't make any money, and nobody thought he was any good. And now he's like the god of art, you know. So, but, you know, again, back to marketing. So I put marketing outside the merchandise circle, and our marketing for a Christian radio station locally involved the sub-pillars of listeners, because not that we were, you know, we weren't necessarily trying to cater for everybody's needs. We weren't, you know, we weren't taking every single bit of feedback and changing our programming because of the listeners, but without listeners, we don't have a radio station. Without listeners, nobody will actually hear about our merchandise, our product. So campaigns, you know, marketing campaigns, maybe billboards, advertising on buses, doing outside broadcasts from community events on the weekends. And also we had the local church in our marketing, because we had, one of our goals was to connect effectively with the local church. And yeah, anyway, in that book that I've written, there's several examples of how we did that. But yeah, that was our way of marketing. Now obviously there's lots of ways of mass marketing and grassroots marketing, like on social media and standing on a street corner giving out books. There's lots of ways to market, and we don't have time to go into examples, but that is what I call the second main pillar. Third pillar is money. Now, like it or not, money is essential in today's world. Now, I've always been interested in business, and I've always been a high achiever, and you know, achieving is almost like an idol. for me that I have to often repent of, because I just love to, I love to push out 5 products in a year and then go, oh, I'm so annoyed I didn't get 6 products out. I'm ridiculous. But that's something that I'm interested in. Ironically, I've never been that interested in making lots and lots of money. I've never been motivated to just sell, glasses just for the sake of making money. But some people are wired that way, and God can use them. So, but money is the third pillar. We have our product, merchandise, marketing, letting people know about our product, and money. Because if we don't have money, we won't have a ministry. We won't have a small ministry to manage. And whatever God's called us to, we won't be able to do it without money. So for our Christian radio station, we had fundraising events, including two main on-air appeals a year. Then from the appeals, we would run 2 off-air campaigns where we tried to convert the new appeal donors into regular givers, which was just, this might be interesting, but we would call up somebody who had given in the November and the June appeal, and in August we'd call them and say, hey, look, thanks so much for your support. We'd love to add any prayer concerns that you've got. We'd love to send you our prayer email. A lot of them were already getting this stuff. But we'd say, look, cash flow is a big issue for us as a small organisation. We've seen that you've given $100 here and $200 here, so $300 across the year. Would you consider giving $30 a month instead of twice a year? And we converted a lot of people from single appeal givers, or giving twice a year, to actually giving every month. And nobody seems to mind that $300 divided by $300 divided by 10 is 30, but they were actually giving for 12 months. And we weren't trying to trick them. That it was just more of a, oh yeah, that's only $60 more. Yeah, that's fine. And I can do it monthly, so that's better for my cash flow as well. So that's something that works really, really, really well for us. We went from like $500 a month in regular giving to several thousand. So it worked really, really well. And what we found with at least half of them was that they would also give during the appeal. Because when somebody says they're going to give to you every single month, they're really committed. Forget about your members that joined it on a lifetime membership 20 years ago and you don't really have contact with them anymore. These guys that are giving out of their meagre salaries every month, they're the ones that really have a heart for your ministry. So anyway, slight story there. So yeah, fundraising events and donations. Membership, for us that was just a minor thing. We didn't really ramp that up as good as we could have. And radio sales. So again, with Christian radio in Australia, we're limited to 5 minutes of advertising per hour, and we can't call it advertising. And so, we had this small amount of airtime that we could sell, that we sold in 30-second lots. And we actually used to just have 4 minutes on air, just in case an announcer was talking about McDonald's or something like that, and somebody who had it in for us decided to call up the authorities and say, hey, these guys mentioned that, they did 6 minutes of advertising. We'd probably only get a slap on the wrist, but still, in this day and age, better to err on the side of caution in the regulatory type of things. And look, I think this is pretty much the same for any organisation. You've got to bring the money in somehow. It usually involves some sort of sales, ultimately fundraising. Certainly in Australia, fundraising is a whole industry. I'm currently consulting to a large national charity, and there's about I don't know, maybe 50 people just in the fundraising and marketing team. Yeah, so it's a lot. But yeah, fundraising, donations was actually what I was talking about before, and then we'd have like gala dinners and things like that that were also a community fundraiser. So anyway, that's my example, but money comes there because you can't have money without telling people about your product, and you can't tell people about your product without your product. So your product's got to be good. The way you tell people about your product, or the way they hear about it, is important. And then the money is the next essential pillar that holds up the organisation. So a pillar is a bit like, if you can imagine, you know, you've got, you know, these pillars here, okay, and you've got a glass of water that is holding up, and if one of these pillars starts to get a bit wobbly, what's going to happen to the organisation, the thing that it's holding up? So pillars literally hold up an organisation, and when one of those pillars, a pillar or a sub-pillar, gets rocky, okay, I won't do it, but that would be cool though. It'll, you know, the whole organisation starts to crumble. A bit like, also like a, you know, like an old wooden bucket made of pails. I always say pillars, but an old wooden bucket is full of water, and then if one of the pails, the long bits of wood, gets a hole in it here, okay, if it gets a hole in it here, the effectiveness of the organisation all drops down to the weakest point, which is kind of a better analogy. If you're weak in one area, it's going to bring the rest of the organisation down to its level. And that's why it's important to look after all of the pillars of your organisation. Now, each organisation will be different. I'd argue that everyone has these four, but yeah, you know, different organisations will have different things. Like listeners isn't going to be one of your sub-pillars for a newspaper, okay? But readers would be. So anyway, the fourth main pillar, management, covering operations, the way that you run the organisation, your processes, the way that you do business, you know, which, you know, can be all over the place. Often when you walk into an organisation, or usually when an organisation's growing and more people get involved and different personalities get involved, the processes are just thrown out the window, either because they're useless now, or because, you know, when you're growing an organisation, it's kind of like, it's all a big rush. You know, it's when everything's urgent, emergencies lose their status type of thing. And you know, like, and processes can sort of fly out the window. But operations, as part of the management pillar, are essential, you know, almost as essential as everything else, because as you're growing, you need to define and write down the processes. Like I had a sales guy who would come and just sort of, oh, that's right, yeah. I had a sales guy who used to come to a part-time admin person who not only sent out the invoice to the client, but also scheduled, you know, traffic scheduling, scheduled the advertising on air into the on air programming. Then we grew, and I had one person doing the invoicing and another person doing traffic and something else, because more sales were coming in. And all of a sudden, the sales guy was lost. You know, typical sales guy. He's good at selling, but not much else. And he comes in, and he was still just like dumping the stuff there. And then there was all this big argument, and I said, well, hang on, Jeff, how do the clients get invoiced? Oh, well, they get invoiced when I give Marilyn the invoice. I said, yep, that works, that's still happening. And I said, and how does the ad get on air? You know? And so I had to put in a process of how that happens, and then how the two people that need to receive his sales docket actually, need to communicate. So operations is essential. Human resources, looking after your people. If you're working with volunteers, I've said for years, if you can't pay them, at least feed them. You've got to look after anyone that's willing to give you time. Volunteers, which was a big thing for us. We were fortunate to have some paid staff, but we were still, we were only able to grow to where we did because of the extra volunteer labour that we had. So you've got to look after people, and I always find with volunteers that they've got to feel useful as well. So if you get a volunteer in and you're like, oh, okay, well, we need help answering the phones, and they might go, oh, okay, but then all of a sudden after a week they don't show up again. Why? Probably because they hate answering the phones. And maybe everybody wants to be an on-air announcer, but maybe they're an ex-accountant. I've had an ex-CPA, well, not an ex-CPA, but a CPA that was on maternity leave, come in and really just resurrect our books and our accounting processes. So look after the people, and the other important thing is governance. A lot of CEOs have issues with their board, and that can filter down into lower staff levels where an organisation can develop a culture where staff are going, oh yeah, well, we wanted to do that, but the board wouldn't let us. That sort of attitude, and ultimately it's a bad attitude. I've never sat on a board. I've only ever been in a position where I report to a board, and so from a manager's point of view, who's used to reporting to a board, yes, it's a pain in the butt. Yes, it's just nobody wants to report to 5 to 8 different people. Yes, a board tends to slow things down in decisions making, but I came to a place in my management life where I realised it's not about why we have to have a board, it's about why we should have a board. And I find that the board is there for governance. The board is there to protect the CEO and the rest of the organisation. Ultimately, the board is there to protect the organisation more than the CEO. I'd say that if the board looks after the CEO, then the CEO will look after the organisation. But, there's lots of individual situations there. But, the board, in a lot of cases as well, are the ones putting their houses on the line if the not-for-profit organisation goes under. The board are the ones that are going to have to deal, with lawsuits, from defamation if, the CEO's not paying attention and some crazy announcer gets on and starts saying all sorts of stuff. So, for me, if that's an issue that you've had, I find it is very much of why we should have a board, not why we have to have one. And I think it's a godly thing because everyone's accountable to somebody, and it's good that not-for-profit organisations are governed by a board rather than just an owner, a single owner. I would much rather, and boards are in for-profit organisations as well, of course, as they get bigger. Public companies all have boards. So it's not just not-for-profit managers that have to, report to a board. Having said all that, the board has to step up as well and learn about governance and responsibility. They have to be committed to turning up to the monthly board meeting, or Skyping in, as it might be these days. They have to be committed to doing the tasks that they said they would do, by a certain deadline. And ultimately they have to learn the distinction between governing and operations. And I know that can depend on the size of the organisation, because, like in some Christian radio stations I know, the board are also the managers, and they're also the on-air announcers, and they're also the salespeople and so forth. But that's not an ideal situation. And even in that case, when they're acting as the board, they need to go, I'm going to make board decisions. And then when they're acting as workers, as operations, they need to go, I have to get out of the board mentality. I've certainly seen it where an organisation, we had one board member who used to love to come and volunteer, and that was great. And he was coming to do some of the paperwork once a week. The problem was he wouldn't get out of board mode. So I'd report to the whole board as the CEO, and then we might just be discussing some operational issue, that we're dealing with, and I would ultimately let the board know about it at the right time. But then he would go, oh, well, I think, well, why don't we just do this? As though he had the whole authority of the whole board. And I had to kind of have an awkward conversation and say, well, look, I actually report to the whole board. The CEO reports to the whole board. And, the board also is, well, we had about 5 or 6. The board makes board decisions together at the board meeting, or via email perhaps. And as a single board member, you can't actually make a decision about this operational thing. So, very sensitive, very political. Fortunately, the rest of the board agreed with me doing that. So, it worked out okay. And the other thing I think I should mention is that on governance, is that there are the place that Satan will attack us most is between the CEO and the chairman of the organisation, and that's the most precious area. If the CEO and the chairman are working in unison, and they're all supporting the pillars, and they're all on the same vision and strategic congruence together, then that works amazingly. And it's great for the board, and it's great for the organisation. But when there's conflict, for whatever reason, between the CEO and the chairman of the board, everything can fall apart. So with my chairmans, and I had a couple, I had to learn, well, all right, if I get some cranky email, or he says something that just offends me, off the cuff, I have to go, hang on, wait a minute. This is the most sensitive area of attack, the most likely area of spiritual attack, and I had to kind of be the bigger man, as they say, and take a step back and go, you know what, I'm just not going to say anything to that. He probably didn't mean anything of it, and I'll just leave it at that, and usually when I did that, it just disappeared, because we're all humans, and we all say stuff that we don't really mean to one another, and sometimes rather than confronting every single issue that offends you in the slightest bit, you've just got to go, different personalities, or if you're working with an engineer, you just go, oh yeah, no personality. And you've just got to go, yeah, it's all right. We're all different. I like to joke around and that sort of thing. And he probably just wants me to shut up and be serious for a moment. So we're all different, and so that's what I've got to say about that. So this is what I think are the 4 pillars, and the sub-pillars are really just examples particular to, probably particular to any Christian radio station. But whatever your organisation is, if you have merchandise, marketing, money and management as part of your 4 pillars, and then find sub-pillars to go underneath them, and if you look up, the first trick is identifying what the pillars are, and then once you've identified them, then you develop your goals, your SMART goals. You know what SMART goals are? Yep. Specific, measurable. I'm very tired. Yep. Timely, deadline, all that. Then you will. But you can develop them around these pillars. But again, you look after the pillars, and the organisation stays at the level that it should be. But you get a hole, one of the pillars starts to crumble, or you get a hole in the bucket on one of the panels, and that issue. So say if that issue brings the whole organisation down. Why? Well, in this situation, we went through a stage where radio sales, they didn't really drop, but they kind of stagnated, and we really needed them to grow. It was in the budget for them to grow. We tried all sorts of things, but radio sales were our hole in the bucket. So what happens with that? Well, if radio sales are bad, then that puts pressure on fundraising events to earn more revenue. It puts pressure on donations to bring more in the appeals, or this one. What happens to it? The board stops focusing on good governance, and they're only focusing on, are we going to be able to pay people? They've changed from a board of governance to an emergency, board. The human resources, if your revenue goes down over here and it doesn't pick up anywhere else, you might have to let people go. And then that, by letting people go, that affects operations. Or even if you don't let people go and they hear or pick up that radio sales are down, they're going to be looking for other jobs. So their mind isn't focused on your organisation anymore. And then what happens? Then the change starts to go inwards, because you don't have time to do market research on your listeners, because you're just focused on bringing sales up, and your campaigns and your work with the local church just goes out the window, and then ultimately your programming, your building and technology, they start to fail because of this little hole in the bucket. So you see, it affects everything. If you don't have this pillar, this sub-pillar working, then it affects all others. It affects all others and will eventually bring the organisation down to its level. Because if you don't have the right amount of income, which sales is partly responsible for, then your transmitter is going to get corroded and struck by lightning, and you won't be able to repair it, and that sort of thing. So you can see how important these pillars are now, I think. And what I'm not going to do a workshop because I talk too much, but I would encourage you to get your notepad, to take a picture of this, to take it back to your organisation, to show it to your board. I'm happy to email you the picture as well. I might email it to Natalie, and then you can get it off her. I'm happy to share anything. To take it back to your board, to take it back to your managers, to your team, and say, look, this is it's a way of looking at an organisation, but it's a specific practical way of identifying every single important thing in your organisation that holds it up. Now, let me just finish with, well, what about ministry? Well, the whole thing's ministry. Okay? The ministry is what you do. For a Christian radio station, the ministry is here in the broadcasting. For a Christian radio station, when I go and speak at a local church and try to convince them that they should be working with us, that's part of the ministry. When we're doing appeals, that is part of the ministry, because it's not just fundraising, because as a Christian organisation, we are concerned about looking after those that support us. And if they're having a hard time, we have the grace to say, look, I don't think we can accept your donation. I think your situation is too tough. Or for the advertisers, look, I'm sorry, but we don't want to promote adult bookshops, on our Christian station. Or, well, we had a policy like no alcohol, no gambling, no tobacco, that sort of thing. Probably similar here.
I will ask one question.
Yeah.
On that model, what I find very interesting about the model that you have here, and one of the situations you've mentioned now is, say for example, radio sales that you have experienced, is the effect that it have even on management.
Yeah.
All right. But if I look at your model there, and I think it's an excellent model, if I look at that, then something tells me that if in the yellow circle something goes wrong, it should not really affect the green circle. The effect should be inwards, which means that if radio sales goes down, then it means marketing and merchandise must pick up.
Yeah.
To balance the yellow circle out again.
It's true.
And management's responsibility is just to keep that inner three circles, one can say, balanced.
That's right.
And stable.
That's why I put that one on the outside.
Yeah. So if marketing fails, the second circle, if marketing fails, then it means merchandise must pick up. The moment merchandise pick up, then marketing will come right and money will come right.
Yeah, absolutely. If the management's responsible for it all, but maybe the money's not coming in, say from here, because the product kind of sucks, right? And the product might suck because you haven't been listening to your listeners, you haven't been doing your due diligence and your proper market research. So yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Correcting the whole thing is focus on the inner circles and do it right.
I hadn't really thought of it that way.
And the green circle, the outside circle, is literally just to stabilize, just create and maintain an environment where within everything can function the way it should.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very good.
I agree with what you're saying, but I think from experience in campus, I think it does affect to some degree, it does affect the outer circle as well, because a lot of attention goes to solving that problem instead of doing operations and doing what we normally do. And if there's a money problem especially, it affects the management salary-wise, it affects human resources. We couldn't hire someone to do human resources. So there might be some effects on the outer circle as well. Maybe to a lesser extent, but definitely we had, we felt it.
Yeah, shouldn't the management circle just be the catalyst that ensure that the inner circle does what it needs to do and oversee that?
Definitely.
But obviously they will have to make decisions in order to keep the boat afloat until the the problem is solved.
Yeah. It's, you know, and some, like, I hate letting people go.
Yeah.
And
That's,
well, for the radio I never did. For another business I did, but that guy was lazy. Sorry, no. I don't know what I was saying. I don't know where I was going there. Yes, sir.
Thought comes to me that this morning our devotion time focused on the story of Mark and how there was a vision which was to get to the other side, but the storms were the thing that disrupted getting to that point of vision. Now, if you try and parallel it with the business side, which I believe we need to as a ministry, when we strike our storms, which could be a monetary problem, in South Africa, a postal problem, and many, many other things, I think what our brother is mentioning, that we go back to the center and we say, are we properly focused on our vision? Because maybe it's changed.
Yeah.
Maybe we've drifted from where we should be, and we're trying to market stuff that was never in our initial calling. And we've added a bit here and added a bit there and added a bit there. And we need to then get our board, our management, to refocus on why are we here?
Yeah.
It's not your new Mercedes-Benz and your holiday or your trip overseas on the next conference and that sort of thing. This is our focus.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Lord was trying to teach us in that illustration, is that when we have these crises along the way, and our ministry also struggles with financing and sort of thing, and then it starts becoming a commercial focus and moving away from the calling, the vision.
And that's, I think, part of the good governance, is having godly men and women on the board who are business-minded, but they never forget that it's not theirs, it's God's ministry. And I was fortunate to have a great board the last few years. Had some troubled ones before, and again my staff. Like some came and went, but while they were there, while they were on the bus, they were really convinced that this is a ministry, and so they understood, because yes, we're here to do God's will. Yes, we're here to do ministry. What this is helping us to manage the ministry so that we can continue to do ministry. It's a bit like CVC. Used to do shortwave radio. They had a lot of shortwave radio transmitters at the top of Australia, and they would broadcast into China mainly, the Christian message. And a few years ago, they did their due diligence and market research, and they realised that people aren't tuning in to shortwave radios in China anymore. And so they actually sold their land and sold their transmitters and stopped doing shortwave radio, and they converted their state-of-the-art, which had a different studio next to each other, all glass panels, each broadcasting in a different language. It's pretty impressive stuff. And they converted all of them to video studios, and they retrained their radio producers to become video producers, and they renamed themselves YesHeIs.com. So now they've gone from this shortwave radio ministry to a very effective and very sort of aggressive growth social media ministry. You've probably come across them. It's just YesHeIs.com if you haven't. Yeah, and they're a great ministry, and on their money side it's still essential, but they're funded by like a British lord, and they're big in Australia, but I'm pretty sure they're here, and they're everywhere. But then again, but everybody has potential problems. Being funded internationally by one person sounds great, because you never have to do, worry about donations and fundraising. Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? But what if this guy changes and he says, you know what? No, I think the whole God thing's a load of rubbish. what happens to their international ministry? They'd have to start learning about fundraising pretty quick. Yeah, sorry, did that answer your question at all? Okay. Maybe time for one more question or comment if people have it. I don't want to hold you up from your AGM. I'm not going. I've been to plenty. Yeah. Well, look, I hope that was useful, and yeah. I guess I mean I'm still speaking tomorrow, but yeah, I've really enjoyed my time here, and hopefully some of what I've said you're able to take away with you and apply it. And I'll say this in my closing talk tomorrow, but you know, whenever I go to our Christian Media Conference, which is also on right now in Australia, the speakers, sometimes you get a good one, sometimes you don't. You can make your decision about me. But I never really go for the speakers. I go for the fellowship and the networking and finding ways that we can all work together. You know, I have to say probably some of my best friends, some of the guys that I confide in the most are people that I might only see once a year for 10 minutes. Because we can actually relate to each other. We aren't, you know, when we say, you know, oh, how's it going? Oh, our sales are down, or oh, we didn't quite get our appeal goal. You're like, yep. You know that they understand what you're going through. So I reckon that's the best part of the conference. As far as the speakers at the workshops, I always say to people, look, forget about the 102 things that you've heard. Just grab one or maybe two things maximum and apply them in your ministry over the next 12 months, and it'll probably double in growth. Yeah. Indeed. So anyway, thanks for having me.
Thank you.